Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Want to start off with the explosion in Beirut today. Killed upwards, I think they're saying 78 people were killed in this massive explosion that Donald Trump called an attack. And this, is again, is another one of these moments where you go, maybe you hold your tongue until you actually know something. Because I can't imagine that his generals, his great generals, according to him, told him that it was an attack and that, oh no, it's the mother of all bombs, it's a Moab, and all of this. What we're finding out is potentially it could be they had stored literally a boatload of ammonium nitrate in a warehouse that caught on fire and caused that massive explosion. And, the videos, were just, wow. I mean, I watched, the one like 10 times going, that is just an enormous blast. But our thoughts go out to those folks because, look, anytime you have this kind of a tragedy, it's not about borders, it's about people, and I wish them the best. Also, as our climate is changing, as the weather is getting more extreme, hurricane, and it's not even hurricane season yet. But if you saw the photographs from Allentown, not too far from here with all the flooding, you saw in all the photos from North Carolina just getting slammed. Again, another one of these moments where in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of all of the other things that are going on, Mother Nature unforgiving. And look, you've got an administration clearly head not on the ball. And, you look at what's going on across the country right now as we still do not have an agreement on a stimulus package, one that you would think, in this moment, if anything would pull a country together, if anything would pull the political parties together, especially the incumbents, it would be giving out free stuff. It would be going, okay, no, in this moment, we're going to make sure that you get enough food, rent, whatever, enough to not lose your situation. You would think, you would seriously think that our Republican senators would be going, no, look, we need to prop up those 2.5 million small businesses that are losing and are closed. We're going to help, prop up all of those people who, because the Republicans love to tell us how much they love work. We're going to help them. That hasn't happened. Now, what's interesting to me is, listening to some of the messaging coming out of the White House, because Kellyanne Conway is saying that potentially Trump is thinking about using an executive order to override Congress, which is interesting to think that he thinks he can do that. Again, the dictatorial kind of fascistic, to use Stephen Calabrese's frame, the tendency there is kind of interesting. Because the one thing that we all learned in 8th grade civics class is Congress controls the purse. I'm sure you remember that. Congress controls the purse. They decide when you spend money. The president can veto and say, no, we're not going to spend money. But he just can't make up money to spend on his own. And this is one of these interesting moments because the Democrats are going, here, we've got a $3+ trillion bill already passed. Going to make sure that people get the money that they need to stay secure, safe, and away from each other. And the Republicans are going, no, we actually want to interject a little more pain. We actually want people to suffer a little bit. We want to make sure that they're deserving. And this, again, is one of those really interesting frames for me in that, the Republicans have always been the party of pain. They've always won you need to be desperate enough. And truthfully, you never rise to that level of desperation that is enough for them. Unless you're a corporate special interest with lobbyists and campaign checks, then that's a whole other story. But if you're just an average everyday working stiff, not so much. And what I find kind of interesting is there's a new study out. And this is something we've talked about on this program for years. This is not new. This isn't something that they, oh my gosh, it's earth-shattering and groundbreaking, and no, it's none of that. But a report published today in the health policy journal Millbank Quarterly, they find that, and I know you're going to be shocked when I say it, completely going to be shocked that red states have a lower life expectancy than blue states. I know, shocking, right? That red areas, their life expectancy is less than people who live in blue areas. And because, look, it comes down to politics, doesn't it? It goes back to, to the 8th grade civics class of government decides who gets what and how. And what you find is in red areas, in Republican-controlled areas, it's more of, you're on your own. If you're struggling, if you're suffering, well, that's your problem. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you don't have any, you better whittle some out of sheer intestinal fortitude. And if you don't have any of that, well, die. Whereas in blue areas, they're going to be more of a safety net. And that's not surprising. That's something, again, we've talked about for some time. They find that the state of California, the liberal oasis, if you will, or from my conservative friends, the communist bastion of California, people are living the longest at 81.3 years. And you put that to the other side, where in states like Alabama, they're not living near that long. And as they point out, look, the blue states are going to have much tougher environmental laws. They're going to have laws that are much tougher on tobacco, regulations on firearms. They're going to protect their workers. They're going to protect minorities. They're going to protect the LGBT community. They're going to have a lot of things in place to ensure that the ravages of insanity don't cause early death. And again, not surprising. And then on the other side, the flip side of this, the more conservative states have, obviously more pollution. They're going to have more labor abuses, more social unrest, more of those things. Not surprising. When you compare the Northeast and the West in the country to the South and Appalachia, it's completely different places. And for those people who say, the United States is really 6 individual countries that you can break up into little segments, the South and Appalachia, they're the ones who are at the bottom. And I take no joy in that. I take no joy in the fact that their education spending is behind. Their healthcare spending is way behind. They don't have the infrastructure that other areas have that they need, and that we haven't made the right investments. And why? Well, I would argue because you have their leadership who continues to leave them behind. And I look right now, and this is just one of those things, right before I went on air, I'm looking at a study that, or actually the poll from Kentucky, from the Morning Consult poll, that has Mitch McConnell up over Amy McGrath, 53 to 36. I mean, that is a wide, enormous gap. McConnell is single-handedly the guy holding back any stimulus money. He is the guy single-handedly holding up any stimulus, any funding going to people who are struggling, and yet somehow, miraculously, the people of Kentucky have completely ignored that. And, well, Moscow Mitch is their guy. And it kind of makes you wonder, why? Is it we just hate those libtards and don't care if my kids eat? I don't know. But it's quite remarkable. And as someone who's spent most of all of my life living in a blue state, I grew up in Ohio, and now kind of a reddish state, and now in Pennsylvania, the idea of having a strong social safety net to me is something of importance. That when you have pandemic, when you have chaos, when you have a hurricane, when you have a disaster, there's someone there that's going to help. That you aren't exploited on the job, that the job isn't a dangerous workplace, and that you have actually health infrastructure, and that ideal that you have a right to health care. And, as we talked about yesterday, out of this pandemic, I keep hoping that maybe those red states who have been, really left behind, I know they've been told you've got freedom. You've got freedom. You have the freedom to die younger. That's your freedom. The hope becomes this is an opportunity because of this pandemic that has really shined the spotlight on just how unequal of a society we are, that maybe we start talking about how to do that. But look, I'm looking again at this polling from Kentucky and going, never mind Kansas. What the hell's the matter with Kentucky? How is it that you go, we're literally going hungry. Millions of people are going to lose their homes because McConnell and the Republicans want that pain. They want that suffering. They want that struggle. And, this has been going on for a long time. This isn't new. And I want to make sure that that's clear. This study has probably been done, 100 times before. And you didn't even need to do it to know. But fortunately, they've written it down, and now we do. This has been happening since, the 70s. This has been going on, for a while, where, more liberal areas have much better policies to protect people, and more conservative areas, well, don't. And you could go, well, that's because, any number of reasons. But I keep coming back to why you would want that and why you would pursue it. When we know, quite frankly, we know that you're going to die sooner. And I'm kind of in this just weird little world where I'm not sure. Because, you look at some of these red areas that are rushing to send their kids back to school. There is just a mad rush. And it comes back to desperation. It comes back to desperate parents who need a place for their kids to go, while they're off to work, because the employer class isn't going to help them. There's no public policy to help with childcare. There's none of that stuff. We don't have policies to help working families, especially working women. And that's magnified, numerous times once you get into the South and Appalachia. So will this be that moment where we go, hey, maybe we change some of that? Judging from what I'm seeing coming out of Kentucky, no. The status quo is what we get. And look, on the sending kids back to school front, I look at Georgia. There was just a story last week from Georgia. Evidently, one of the big school districts there in Georgia, the Gwinnett County public school system, which is, I guess, they got like more than 180,000 kids that go to the school. They opened up on Wednesday for the district's elementary, high school, and middle school personnel to start planning for the fall session, to bring people in to start just doing planning. They're not even bringing all the kids in. And immediately 260 employees have had to go home to be quarantined. And you go, but these are the teachers, these are the staff, these aren't even the kids. And a huge part of the people are now quarantined. And you go, can we do nothing right? And it's not a matter of doing this right. It's a matter of we shouldn't be doing it at all at this moment. And this is, again, one of those weird little things where the conservative mindset is, well, we're just going to, never mind. There's only a bunch of people who are going to die off. As long as it's not me, because I've got options. But the poor working stiffs of this country, this virus is ripping through the poverty class in this country. And the question is, what do we continue to put up with it? And I sure hope the answer is no. I'm sure hoping that Kentucky gets their head out of their whiskey or bourbon or whatever it is that they make down there, and out of the horses behind, and does something to get rid of McConnell. I mean, it makes no sense that we still don't have a piece of legislation to fund a stimulus plan. It's just insane. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you buy what the study has to say? Do you buy the fact that there are these wide discrepancies in life expectancy, and it comes back to the policies that local governments and state governments pursue? Do you buy the fact that, by having strong environmental, labor, these kind of regulations in place, that maybe you might live a little longer? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Greg Hurwitz going to be here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day and maybe how we move along through this pandemic. Quick break. Right back with Greg.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day Michael Siegel, business agent for New York City's Local 3 IBEW, announced the lights would be going out on Broadway for a half an hour. Electricians had been on strike for nearly a week to protest Consolidated Edison's refusal to employ union electricians for work on its new Waterside plant. The company claimed it could only use members of the Brotherhood of Edison Employees, an independent union. The walkout also affected electricians at area construction sites and at 25 defense contractors across the city. The union had agreed to exempt electricians at the Brooklyn Navy Yards, where the strike held up work on 4 battleships. Also, the IBEW allowed electricians at Ford Instrument to return to work, given they had orders for $100 million in defense instruments. Siegel announced that at 9 p.m. the following evening, maintenance men not on strike would pull the switches on all signs in Times Square in sympathy to bring attention to their plight. After the half-hour blackout, the IBEW continued to fight injunctions brought by the New York Electrical Contractors Association. Harry Van Arnsdale Jr., business manager for Local 3, declared the blackout had been more successful than they had hoped. He characterized the switch-off as a blackout for enlightenment. Naval officials complained, however, that the strike held up vital defense projects. Newspapers noted that Broadwayites suddenly noticed the moon when the estimated 10 million watts of super lighting was turned off. A Times Square veteran noted it was the darkest since 1918 when a Zeppelin raid alarm caused a blackout. The strike was called off a week later when Con Ed acknowledged its previous agreement with the IBEW. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So our quote of the day from George Conway, he says, for the sake of our constitutional republic, Trump he's talking about, must lose and lose badly. He said, yet that should be just a start. We should only honor former presidents who uphold and sustain our nation's enduring democratic values. There should be no schools, bridges, or statues devoted to Trump. His name should live in infamy, and he should be remembered, if at all, for precisely what he was, not a president, but a blundering cheat. I said from the beginning, when all the people were saying, hey, he's going to resign, oh, we're going to beat, I go, no, I want him beat and beat badly at the polls. I want us, we the people, we the voters, to come out and turn this kind of divisiveness, ignorance, hatred, whatever you want to put into it, turn it away. Because I still say we're better than this. Just my thoughts. But here to share some thoughts on, well, should we honor Trump post-presidency? I've asked Greg Hurwitz to come talk with us, New York Times best-selling thriller author. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back on.
So what do you think of George Conway's thoughts there? We beat the hell out of him at the poll, and then we do not slap his name on anything.
I, right now, am taking nothing for granted. So I'm only thinking as far, what are we, 97 days out? How many more days do we have?
I think 91.
Oh, boy. See, I lost a week there, like most of us. I'm not thinking beyond that. I mean, you look at the lead Dukakis had at this stage. You look at what's going on with the post office right now, and all that I'm focused on is having such a decisive margin of victory that it can be uncontested.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. As Obama said, if they're going to steal 7 million votes, we need to get 8. And that means people need to get out and vote. But you hit on something, because yesterday Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, said that election day is going to happen on time. I didn't know that there was a chance that it wouldn't. I know Trump floated the idea of delaying it. Any thoughts on the potential of having a delayed election?
I don't think anyone will stand for that. Look, I've been proven wrong a lot of times, but I mean, you saw a pretty decisive backlash to that remark about delaying the election from both sides of the aisle. And I think that people start to recognize, even his sort of enablers in the Senate and Congress realize that that's one bridge too far, I believe. But, I feel like we need to be on alert on every single front. There's
Right.
nothing at this point I'm willing to take for granted. I mean, I feel like we need to talk to every single community, from evangelicals through, Hispanic vote, Black Lives Matter, military. I feel like we need to talk to everybody and make good, sound arguments to everybody. And if we can pick up, 5% more here, 2% more there. And we have to do it by being legitimate. We have to make real arguments. One of the things that we're seeing is that the positive, I heard a statistic the other day that Hillary Clinton's was 95% negative on Trump, 5% positive, and Trump was 50-50. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is that there's a lot of noise in the cycle right now that is negative against Trump. And in a certain way, I think everybody already gets that. And we need to start making really strong arguments for why, in fact, the Democrats should be the party to lead the way on anti-corruption with HR 1 in Congress to rebuild the economy. That, as we talked about last time I was on, the guy you send in hockey as the enforcer is not the guy that you want to put everything back together again. And I think Trump came in to blow everything up, and that's why they wanted him there, and he did that. And I don't think anybody believes that he is unifying, even his supporters.
Yeah. As my grandfather always said, any idiot can tear down a house. Just give him a hammer. It takes a craftsman to build it. We absolutely need a craftsman at this moment.
Well, and I think also Biden is not, everyone knows Biden's not a rabid socialist. He's a guy who's going to let us catch our breath. We understand he's fundamentally decent. He's never owned a stock, right? He's part of a political system that has largely been influenced by money and politics, but I don't think he's going to continue a trajectory that we've seen undermining workers for 40 years, because everyone's just too awake right now. And I think he's a really solid choice. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about the last couple of weeks is actually how much agreement there is in America, which I know is a sort of shocking position. But I mean, if you go through, you talk to people think hard work and innovation should be rewarded. People think we pay too much for healthcare and the system is dumb. People believe that we want a competent, just legal system with enforcement that protects everybody equally. We believe there should be some version of humane and lawful immigration. If you go down the list of things before we get into nitty-gritty issues of extent and degree, we agree on virtually everything. Most people, you can go in the deep south, deep red counties. People want clean fields and streams, right? People want clean oceans. And there are so many forces that have been just lambasting us to amplify our differences. Both social media, which we know that it's based on creating division, and that's the dopamine hit. We have mainstream news media, which, adrenaline and noise and discord drive their dollars. Politicians need to amplify division to raise money. And the lobbyists, of course, need to make sure that everybody is spun around in big corporations, because, when Congress passes laws that aren't supported by anybody, and the odds that a law will pass, I'm sure you know the statistic, but a lot of people don't. The general populace's support for a particular law has 0% bearing on whether that will pass into law or not.
Yep.
A bill, I mean. And so there's so many things that we agree on. If we back out of this, we have a big swath of 70-80% of people in the middle who kind of get it all. And if we can unplug from this sort of matrix of toxicity and spin and news and media and nonsense, and actually get to work of governing, I think there's a lot that we can start to do with a different kind of awareness right now about class and corporatism and race and these conversations that we're having.
Yeah, but at the end of this, I've said for years that I believe we all want to get to the same place. It's just following different paths. We all want good schools. We all want safe neighborhoods. We all want good jobs, family-sustaining jobs with health security and retirement security. We want what my grandparents' generation had. that idealized, 1950s era kind of prosperous working class. The question is, how do you get back to that? I have my conservative friends who say, no, the free market will dictate all this. Well, this is kind of how we've gotten where we are. This race to the bottom of exploiting labor and exploiting in the environment and exploiting policy. This is where we've gotten to, and I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping there's a moment now where we as a country, kind of maybe shake awake and say, how do we get to where we want to go?
There is a common meeting ground, I think, with free market conservatives if they are good faith, because we don't have anything approaching a free market right now. We have overwhelming corporatism. I was having a conversation with Rick Wilson the other day, and he said basically as soon as corporations realized that they could do better by funding lobbyists to pass laws rather than innovate and compete, then the game was over. So a free market means that you don't have a bailout that Trump's private jet donor gets $27 million. That's not a free market capitalism. It doesn't mean that we have these, $1 trillion of tax cuts going to the most wealthy. It doesn't mean the kinds of monopolies that we're seeing in play. Actual free market means there's a lot of competition and that people have an ability to actually compete and enter the marketplace. And I think there's a lot of meeting points on this issue of corruption that span the gap from, frankly, hardcore MAGAites all the way through Bernie bros. Like, people look at a system that is fundamentally broken and not working. We've had no real wage growth in 40 years now, and we need to untangle this. And so I think that conservatives who are actual free market conservatives would look at what Donald Trump has done. They would look at the budget. They would look at the deficit. And even my libertarian friends have an awareness. This COVID fiasco is a perfect example of where we could use the debate not over big government or small government, but a competent government that reacts in a way that is decisive, that then preserves the entire economic system. So I think that we have a lot of ground to go. And I think in some ways, the one thing I will tip my hat to Trump for is I think that he talks so much about the corruption of the system. And I think he embodies the venal corruption so fully that we can never look away from it again. We can't merely go back to a system of kind of the sorts of Wall Street bailouts and stuff that we've had before again. He gave voice to it. I think he was a con man. I think he was brilliant and put his finger on a lot of the hypocrisy on the left and right both. And there's a lot of work we have to do now to fix it.
Yeah, and that becomes with starting on election day, and then staying involved. And my fear again is because we've kind of seen these movies play over and over again. Every time there's a collapse, you have this big ramp up. In 2008 we elected President Obama, and then everybody went home, and we left it to a political class who clearly was not up to the challenge. Do you see that as a potential of happening this time around, or does this time do we learn the lesson?
I think that's one of the smartest questions and one of the most important conversations that I don't think anybody is having. And my answer to that is this. I actually think Joe Biden is a fundamentally decent guy who, I think he's trustworthy. I think he's decent. I think he's, returned from tragedy again and again and focused and made his way towards hope and towards something that is better. With that said, this system and the ways in which politicians have failed us, and they're a product of this system, is enormously alarming. And I think that what we have to recognize in the Democrats is they are the party to me that is clearly less corrupt right now. Right. I don't think that there's an argument about that. I don't think we get far by packaging them as, our party by pretending that that the top of the ticket is going to be a version of Nelson Mandela and Robert Kennedy. I think we look at it, where I feel the most hope and where I feel the most optimism are in a lot of our freshman candidates from 2018. There's a slew of them, from Haley Stevens to Alyssa Slotkin to Dean Phillips to Lucy McBath. The talent on the bench of people who are virtuous statesmen who came off the sidelines in order to run. School teachers, nurses, CIA, military, who they feel like statesmen to me. And if we can just hold on for 4 to 8 years, the leadership class in the Democratic Party is staggering. Now, I'm not as familiar with the bench on the Republican side because, you know, I feel like the party has largely kowtowed to Trump, and I think that what he represents is a threat to our democracy and our democratic constitution. So I've been less focused on trying to help that. But I'll tell you, I feel like there's real green shoots of valor and integrity in the people who are coming up on the Democratic side. And if we can just hang on for a few more years, we're going to have some amazing people.
Yeah, but but here's my problem, and maybe you'll agree or disagree. I fear what's happening right now is the Republicans understand that they're probably going to take a beating in November. So we're seeing scorched earth right now. We're seeing no real interest in ensuring that the economy doesn't get worse, that the virus doesn't get worse, that all of the things that we've talked about, all of the divisions don't get worse, because they know that Biden's going to have 2 years to clean up the mess that Trump has made over the last 4, knowing that the midterms always, the incumbent party always takes a beating, and that their hope is regain Congress in 2 years after they've created this mess. And in 4 years, they're going to compete again for the White House. That's one of my great fears, because we're an amnesic society. Sadly, I was saying in 2008 and 9, we're not going to see another Republican president, maybe for my lifetime, after this massive debacle during the Bush years. And yet we got somebody much worse than George Bush. So that's kind of where my thinking is at this moment. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I think that you're right, that that's a very real risk. And I think it highlights, look, if we are fortunate enough to win the White House, right, hold the House and pick up, some ground in the Senate, we have an immense and different responsibility. And the immense and different responsibility that we have, and by that I mean people who aren't paid members of the political class, but the people who fundraised and fought and marched, is going to be to hold to account our leadership. And it's also going to be to not be, look, if we're victorious, we are married to half of this country, 49% of this country who voted for Trump. If we decide to be sanctimonious and condescending and vengeful and gleeful in the victory, there will be another backlash. And so the call is going to be the same thing that we are demanding of our leadership. Are we going to be able to look with humility and have an appreciation and respect for differences and figure out how to compromise and figure out, compromise has become this like horrible word, right, in a lot of ways. And we're not going to get anything done without that. Electoral college, the Senate is set up that way. And by that, I do not mean that we get rid of our core values for 1 minute. I mean that we hold strong, that we don't turn a blind eye when our candidates we need to hold our candidates and our people to a higher standard.
I agree with you, Greg. But, the thing is I'm struggling in this moment because, I have such rage at this administration and all of the things that they've caused. I have such rage at the people who've put us in this position, and their rage equal back at us. We're in this moment where, I see, working people, who are just in the workplace pitted against one another. Right. And I look at, just the other day, I saw this story about Alex Jones, who was urging the people listening to his radio show to kill protesters in a defensive way. And you go, how do you deal with a group of people who think in that vein? I have never advocated for killing someone I disagree with. You and I can disagree. And I've always said the great thing about this country is we each have the right to disagree. We don't have to kill each other. You've got the Alex Jones types of this country who are just wanting that to happen. You see these protests with the Black Lives Matter folks down in Arkansas, people showing up with freaking flamethrowers. It's crazy to me.
That's right. And those are the extremes, and those extremes are certainly real. The question is can we as a populace, are we going to screw up this great unbroken chain of democracy that stretches all the way back to Washington? And the question is right now, are we going to wake up to the fact that these divisions that are stoked by people who make inordinate amounts of money? How much money does Alex Jones have? How much money does Sean Hannity have? How much money do these guys make on this? And while we are busy fighting down in the pit over scraps, with the country is being looted. That is literally what is happening. We had an immense, you talk about your free market friends who are conservatives. we're seeing an immense transfer of wealth from the working class to the wealthy in these tax cuts and this bailout.
Yeah.
And frankly, we saw a lot of it under TARP, where people were filling out a single form for bailouts of hundreds of millions of dollars.
No, you're absolutely right, and this is one of those moments, and it's on both sides, and I absolutely agree. But this is one of those moments where, I'm hoping we get leadership back, and I look at this story that came out of Maryland, where the governor of Maryland has put together 6 states, Maryland being one of them, I guess, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, Ohio, and Virginia. They have now come together and kind of made their own little purchasing agent to buy coronavirus tests because they have no faith in our federal government.
You know what Alyssa Slotkin did?
Tell me.
Alyssa Slotkin became a personal dealer for PPE, and she commissioned in Michigan because she couldn't get enough for the people that she represents. And she commissioned a guy who is a sex toy manufacturer in China and flipped it around and brought in thousands of units. She just went and set up the whole thing herself to get what she needed for her people in her district. And that's the sort of, you talk about free market, this is now on the Democratic side. But, to me, the whole game is laid bare. It's like either we wake up and start acting like adults. We can't wait for magical leaders to save us. This is our responsibility. We can unplug and recognize that we have to put this together. And the more that we fight and the more that we do this, the more that everything gets looted. And the more, it's to everybody's advantage who are the rent-seeking giant corporations for us to be quarreling and wasting our time on Twitter as long as we can't have any say in which bills get passed into law. This is all the time that we're wasting, is doing all of this. And we can't wait for a leader to save us. Politicians are imperfect, flawed human beings. Before JFK, we never needed to have somebody that we needed to have a beer with or, have over for a dinner party. It was like, we need people who are competent, but they can't be the answer and the savior to us. We have to do that also. And I think that a lot of the corruption that has come through the political system is at our own hands and our own choices, in addition to the fact that we need people moving into public service and into political positions who are competent people. And Trump scared a whole flurry of them into office in 2018, and that's the good news. But I do think a lot of it's up to us.
It's all going to come out to who we vote for come November and how we clean up this mess. Last question I've got for you. Did you see the Jonathan Swan interview of the president recently? And his comments on, or lack of comments on, John Lewis. I mean, this is one of those moments where I look at someone like Trump and I'm still scratching my head of how he rose to the position that he's in, given the fact that he really is just all about himself.
Yeah, he is. And I think that, I think that the reason why he rose to himself is, and, again, you and I've discussed this, a few times, pretend that we were right now in coming to the end of the 4th year of Hillary Clinton's presidency. I think the world would be better. I think she's an immensely brilliant and competent and qualified person. I don't think we'd be having anywhere near the kinds of conversations that we have that need to blow up and exterminate the venal corporatism that has overtaken our culture for the last 4 to 5 decades.
So if I'm getting what you're saying right, is this might be good medicine for us, because maybe this is an opportunity to reimagine and rethink the future of this country for my kids and my grandkids. Is it the sunny optimism that I'm getting from you?
I don't know if it's that. I mean, I feel like America, I was flattened when Trump won the election, and I wasn't involved in politics much. I was happily writing my thrillers and, typing and writing screenplays. And part of what scared me into motion was the awareness of the threat that he represented, but also the fact that this in some ways happened on all of our collective watch. And in a weird way, if we can do the right thing now, maybe America picked the right poison in 2016.
Yeah.
As awful and excruciating as this is, it's up to us now to make sure that when we look back in 2020 and 2024 and 2030, that might have been the right thing, and we might have had another unbroken chain. If everything kept moving in income injustice in the direction that it has for working class families in America, we would be at the Hunger Games in 2026 or 2030. And you know, maybe there's something in this big, messy, imperfect experiment of our republic. You know, it's up to us now to determine whether he's the worst thing that happened to America or a very essential wake-up call. And it's contingent upon us to make sure that it's the latter.
Yeah, I said on Inauguration Day, he's going to be remembered as the great uniter. He is going to unite the country. Sadly, it's going to be against him.
Yeah, maybe he'll make America great again.
No, he's going to unite the country against him. And like you said, you were floored. I expected him to win. I had called it, months earlier that he was certainly going to win. Because, I saw that he connected with, my family who, unfortunately are the basket of deplorables. They registered to vote specifically for him. And to me, that sent a huge message.
I'll tell you something else that's really a very unpopular thing to say, which is in 2014 to 2015, I was having conversations with people and I was deeply concerned about what I saw as a rising intolerance on the left and the sort of an under the surface rage that was simmering based on the prevailing attitudes of what, Trump has labeled the coastal elites. And I was seeing it. And I remember clear as day, exactly where I was. I was having lunch with a friend who's fairly prominent in politics and business leadership, and just saying, if we don't figure out how to embody the tolerance that we claim to have, you have no idea what's going to hit us. This was before anyone had heard of Trump as a politician.
No, you're right. Look, I'd lived through it. Look, as an older, straight, white, working class male who considers myself a liberal, I have seen that kind of intolerance, firsthand. There just doesn't seem to be room for the white working class in the liberal side of things much anymore. And I'm one of those guys who says, no, that we have to reach out to everyone. We have to figure out how to be tolerant of everyone, because once we're divided, well, we're exploitable. We're desperate, and that can't happen.
I'll tell you something else that's been really interesting. Where I have seen instances of that kind of intolerance most is from other affluent white liberals. It has been much less from the actual communities who have done the suffering and need to make progress and understand that you have to coalition build, because you can't. And you look about the African-American community, which has saved us time and again. And that Doug Jones election, that first Senate election, right? 97% African-American women for him, 95% turnout. They understood the stakes. And I feel like a lot of this tolerance, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been, trying to figure out what it's about. In a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of it has been a sort of, it's a way to not look at the actual problems and the actual work that might be required to fix the problems in a way. So that if you can participate in a way that's detrimental on social media and feel like you've done your turn, it's sort of safer for you versus the real hard work of looking at the injustices and doing the work. And if you screw up, because we all have blind spots and we all have biases, to say, whoa, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. My bad, let me fix it. Let me look at that differently. Cool, acceptance, moving forward.
Right.
And the intolerance is also about a lack of kind of grace and forgiveness that we need to have between what are often awkward allies, which might include white guys like you and me, and people who actually have bad intentions in mind. And it's very interesting, the quarters where that traces, where you see, those instances that I was noticing pop up. And I was, I have a lot of friends in the military. I have a very broad gamut of friends across the political spectrum. And I was noting 2014, 2015, this simmering concern and anger about what was kind of coming. And it's very interesting. And so my hope is that what we have learned is that if you're doing the work, you don't have a lot of time to point fingers and complain. There's a lot of work to do right now. We got
a lot of digging. We got a lot of digging to do, and we need to get to it. Greg, as always, I appreciate your thoughts at the time. Really good conversation. Thanks.
Great to see you, Rick.
Good stuff. Greg Hurwitz. Make sure you check out his website, greghurwitz.com. As always, good talking with him. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day that the United States and Mexico signed the Mexican Farm Labor Agreement. It became known as the Bracero Program. The word bracero can be translated into one who works with his arms and refers to farm workers. This program allowed Mexican agricultural workers to enter the United States on a temporary basis. There was a shortage of labor due to the U.S. entry into World War II. Large American farm owners were clamoring for cheap labor. By 1945, more than 100,000 Mexican migrant workers were employed through bracero contracts, mostly in western and southern states. Most were farm workers, but others labored on the railroads. The program continued until 1964. More than 4.5 million individual labor contracts with Mexican workers were awarded as part of this program. Many of these workers faced exploitation and discrimination. For example, some of the workers had to subject themselves to fumigation by DDT before they could enter the United States to work. These Mexican workers were often paid less than white workers performing the same labor, and they were often cheated out of their wages. The workers were required to work long hours under often grueling conditions. Despite this exploitation, the Bracero program did have some minimal protections for pay and working conditions for those under contract. Farm owners unwilling to meet even these low standards began to hire undocumented labor to skirt the rules. Labor organizer Ernesto Galarraza wrote a book about the program called Stranger in Our Fields. In it, he recounts a worker explaining, quote, "In this camp, we have no names. We are called only by numbers." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, as Greg was saying, one of the things that I agree completely with him on in 2014, 2015, and I would even argue even a little bit before then, the left has gotten a little intolerant, and I think that's because you're under attack so much that you become hardened, and it just. It's that fight that you see, but to highlight what he was saying, because I go to a lot. I've gone to a lot of these conferences and conventions and all kinds of get-togethers, and there's always to highlight his point about the liberal elites, especially the coastal folks who they've got their office jobs. They're upper professionals. They look down on working people. And, this I think is part of what the appeal for a lot of my working class friends who are big, quote unquote conservatives, that, they pander to them. They pander to them heavily. Oh, you're smarter than you are. You're better than you are. Oh, you're wonderful. You're all of this stuff. And they've bloated them up. Which is why now you've got an entire white working class full of guys who think that they know everything. They're experts on it all because, you listen to a radio program, and it's kind of interesting to me, because we do have so much work to do, and the opportunities that working people have had over the years, and this is where my focus has always been, the idea that work should matter, work should be rewarded and valued. That doesn't seem hard to me. And I said, on election night and, on inauguration day when Obama took office, that's my hope. I hope he returns reward to work. That what I grew up into, the idea that you work hard, play by the rules, you get ahead, actually happens for people. Because I do believe, folks want to work. As much as the Republicans are now saying, "Oh, we can't give them extra $600 a week because they're lazy and they'll stay home," even though there are a couple of studies out there already. Yale has one out now, I guess, that has shown that there is no effect whatsoever on employment with the increased unemployment, because everyone knows it's short term. Everyone knows eventually it goes away, and eventually you need health care. Eventually you want a pension. Eventually you want the things that come with employment, especially the satisfaction, the idea that you have something to get up and do. And, as a working class liberal, I'm one of those people who believes you got to work. You want to eat, you got to work. But in this moment, this is one of those times where you go, maybe we do take that break. I mean, the fact that really neither political party, and I'll blame this on Democrats too, have said, hey, you know what? We need to lock everything down now. We need to shut it down right now for at least 3, 4, maybe 5 weeks. And hard down. Pass a huge stimulus bill. Pass a huge thing so people can pay their rent, so they can pay their light bill, so they can, keep getting food deliveries or whatever. But stay home. And let this thing go away. Viruses, as it's been explained to me by experts, if it doesn't have a host, if it doesn't have somewhere to go, it dies. If it can't be spread to the next person, and the next person, and the next person, it dies. And the thing is it's being spread rapidly right now. And there is no leadership coming out of D.C. And the fact that Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, is teamed up with 5 other states to go and buy these tests, in a buying group, tells you that our federal government is failing them. Because there's a test out there right now that in 15 minutes you can find out whether you've got it or not. And evidently they've ordered 3 million of them. Is that enough? No, but it's a start. It's a start at saying, hey, how do we make sure that people are safe? And how do you, look, I've got friends who have, elderly parents, grandparents still alive. I unfortunately don't. They want to go see them. They want to go see grandma. They want to see mom and dad. They want to go and visit. But they don't want to go and go, hey, you know what? I don't know. Am I asymptomatic? Am I carrying this? And is it possible that I'm going to kill mom or dad or granny off? The burden of that is pretty enormous. And the fact that we have the ability for these tests to be available and there isn't just a massive push to do it, to me is political malpractice. But understand, Trump sees the rising number as an attack on him. And he's said very clearly, we should stop testing so we don't have so many cases, which is insane, but very Trumpian, very predictable. I say we most certainly do more testing. See, because there are a couple of ways of looking at this. And for me, you test everybody. This way you can go, well, the rate of infection is this number. Maybe you lower the rate of infection by testing everybody. And maybe by testing everybody and having, a huge number of people who might have it, and, maybe you bring the death rate down. Who knows? But if you don't have the data, if you don't know what you don't know, well, you're going to continue doing dumb stuff, or as they're doing, ignoring it. And that to me is just nuts. And like Greg said a minute ago, I do believe all of us want kind of the same stuff. I do believe we're somewhere between the curbs. We're on the road together. Sure, there's some who are off on the tree lawn, the Alex Joneses of the world who are saying, "Oh, we should go kill people." Look, there are those fringe groups. There are those people who show up to protest with a flamethrower and AR-15s because they want to show how tough they are. But I think, the mass of us just want to live good, decent lives. I think it's a national disgrace that the southern part of our country in Appalachia has a lower life expectancy than the rest of the country. I think it's a national disgrace. I think it's a national disgrace that we allow certain areas to be polluted and exploited. I think it's a national disgrace. And we should be completely outraged. Even if it doesn't affect us, we should be outraged by the fact. Look, I don't live in southern West Virginia. I know people who do. I know life is tough there. I know opioid addictions are through the roof. I know opportunity and employment are nowhere to be found. And I know it's a tough, long existence with a shortened life. And it's a national disgrace. And yet, what have we seen our elected leaders do? You know, it's interesting. You know, we brought up the thing with Mitch McConnell. And immediately the comments coming back on it are, well, you know, Kentucky won't vote for a woman. So you're willing to literally die 10 years sooner so that an old white guy with seniority can be your representative instead of having a woman who might actually get you health care, who might actually bring some resource into the state to create jobs and create opportunity and health care so that you might live a little longer and a better quality life. What does that say? What does that say about people? And it's a concept that's completely foreign to me, which is why, again, I view myself as a working class liberal. I don't care who it is. We leave no one behind. I don't care who it is in the richest country in the world. No child should go hungry. No veteran should go homeless. No family should be out in the street. Is that too much? Is that too extreme in the wealthiest country in the world? Is that too liberal? No one should be attacked or beaten or killed for who they are. We should treat each other with dignity and respect, regardless of your ideology or your views. And I've always believed that. And yet I look at this story with Alex Jones saying we should kill people in a defensive way. Understand, the mindset is we're going to go to these protests because they're all violent and we're looking for trouble. We're going to go to these places where American citizens are voicing their grievance to their government, seeking redress of grievance under our Constitution against their government. This guy is telling his people to go there, look for trouble, and kill people in a defensive way. If that's not domestic terrorism, I don't know what it is. And, I know he's looking for attention, and you've got those folks who, they need the attention. Maybe somebody dropped him when he was a kid. I don't know. But there are those out there who hear that and go, yeah, I'm going to get my flamethrower and I'm going to go to the rally. Or I'm going to harass the black kid walking down the street with the iced tea and the Skittles to the point where he starts a fight and then, he's going to beat my behind and I'm going to have to shoot him because I was in fear of my life. Is this the country we want? And this is what November is all about for me. This is what, going back to the George Conway quote, I hope we as a country turn Trump away in a huge way. I hope Walter Mondale is now a footnote in history, and Trump will be beaten worse than anyone in history at the polls by we the people casting our ballots and rejecting everything that he has stood for the last 3.5 years. To me, that's always been the outcome. And if you've listened to this show, people have come on and said, no, he's going to resign. We're going to impeach him. All this stuff. I go, no, you got to beat him at the polls. Because it's more than just about him. It's about us. Just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Unfortunately, an exotic flu epidemic has broken out in Washington, D.C. Dubbed the Canadian hot sauce flu, it uniquely afflicts a particular group of Democratic office holders and operatives. CHS flu renders its victims weaker than Canadian hot sauce, leaving them unable to stand boldly for the workaday majority they're supposed to represent. Instead, the afflicted, who are mostly old-line party leaders, are reduced to don't-rock-the-boat corporatism and conservative appeasement when advancing policy ideas. They fear that anything stronger will spook centrist voters. This breakout is a reaction to the recent surge of younger, progressive voters and office holders openly pushing real populist change, including a Green New Deal, taxing the obscene wealth of corporate profiteers, public financing of our public elections, breaking up monopolies, restoring labor rights, free higher education and tech training, and Medicare for all. Far from alienating the electorate, these proposals are generating majority support precisely because they are bold and clearly would benefit, well, the majority. Yet, the protectors of the old money-soaked politics-as-usual system are wailing that the party must move to the center rather than to the left. But wait, their mythological center is way over to the right, hunkered down with corporate interests and blocking working-class progress. This is Jim Hightower saying, the future of the party doesn't require moving left, center, or right. These are ideological positions. Instead, the Dems should move out to the grassroots reality of ordinary Americans. People there are envisioning, electing, and beginning to enact a true progressive agenda to advance our nation's democratic ideals of economic fairness, social justice, and equal opportunity for all. That is a politics of integrity, a politics that is worthy of all of our involvement.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Rolling Stone magazine reported today that Neil Young, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young fame, and rocking in the free world fame, has filed suit against Donald Trump and the Trump campaign for playing "Rocking in the Free World" and the Devil's Sidewalk song at his rallies. And I love what he said. Look, he said, in good conscience, I can't allow my music to be used as the theme song for a divisive, un-American campaign of ignorance and hate. And good on Neil. Look, I love the songs, but good on him for speaking out. Because after all, what does he care? He's Canadian. If I were him, I'd be back in Canada. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on what's going on. The big news of the day from North Carolina, the convention coming up, the secret convention. I've asked our good friend Ted Corcoran to come talk with us. Ted is famously known as Red T Raccoon on Twitter. He's also a disabled veteran and advocate for veterans. Ted, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me. Rick, you get me laughing every single time I'm about to come on. Neil Young in Canada just had me chuckling for a second. I guess we all need a laugh nowadays, huh?
Yeah, look, the truth is what it is, man. If I'm Neil Young, I'm getting out of here. The virus is bad. I'm sure you know it. You're in North Carolina. In fact, it's so bad that the Republicans are going to have their nomination in secret.
Imagine that. It's they love getting in front of their press, but when something like this happens, they're going to try to go and hide it. It's an interesting situation. A back and forth. Believe me, I wish they weren't here and they stuck to Florida, but I feel bad for Florida. I don't want to pass that problem off to them. Just ridiculous. And I think I hope that it's nice and calm. I hope that they don't turn this into a Chicago. They don't turn this into a situation where they're fanning the flames that are happening across our country and to my home state in Charlotte.
Yeah, it's especially in this moment because we still are in the middle of a global pandemic, and North Carolina's got some problems like everyone else. You're doing better than Florida, but still, there's a big concern.
Yeah, there is, and we're having problems as it is. We're trying to go and keep things under control, at least in my county and a lot of the the areas around here, schools are not opening. But this is actually a reoccurring thing in North Carolina. So Trump and Pence both came here last week. I think that they see the tide is turning really badly for them in North Carolina, and they're trying drastically to go and do anything they can to go and show themselves.
Right.
And I'm sure this isn't the last time that we see Trump or Pence sticking their nose in North Carolina over the next couple months.
Oh, Pennsylvania as well. They were here in the state. You know, Pence was here the last week, and it was like, why? Because, you know, look, if the trend continues to go the way I see it going, and I'm really hoping it does, because I think the country needs a cleansing. I see this being a huge landslide victory for Biden, but more than just a victory for Biden, as a repudiation of everything that Trump stands for.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And you hit it right in the head before I jumped on. We can talk about impeachment. We can talk about him quitting. This country needs an overwhelming victory against him and everything that he stands for, and his toxic policies and his agendas that he's brought upon us. And I think, the only way that we can really do that is voting.
I was saying that when it wasn't popular.
Yeah.
When everyone's saying, no, he's going to resign, no, we're going to impeach him, going, the Senate's never going to impeach him, and there's no way in hell his ego is going to ever allow him to resign. He's got to be beaten, and he's got to be beaten soundly.
Yep, definitely. And we have, less than 90 days now to go and start making that a reality. So I'm telling everybody, make sure, most of the people that we speak to are registered to vote. Make sure that you're still registered to vote. Make sure that you're still able to go and do that, because we know that there's been a lot of cleansing in regards to these voter registration files. And bring a friend. I'm telling you, if you're talking about it to your friends, you're talking about it with your family, bring them with you.
Yeah.
Drive people to the polls. I know it's tough with social distancing. Vote by mail. Go and do the absentee ballots. Do them early. Get it taken care of. We don't want any question in this election. And Trump's trying to raise those questions right now.
No, absolutely. But here's the thing. Stacey Abrams came out today. I'm sure you saw this, where she said, don't expect a result on election night. And this is going to be a huge shift for us in this country. And I've said for years, I think it's ridiculous that within 5 minutes of the polls closing, we want to know who won. Whereas in other countries, they actually count the ballots. I'm of the mindset I'm okay. I'm okay if it takes a couple of days, as long as we get it right.
Yeah, the instant gratification that Americans have is that we have to have it. We have to have it now. It's that's right. I would rather have it done right than have it done quickly and have it wrong. And especially now, they're already raising the questions in regards to this. We need to make sure that it's completely legit. And this is a big thing that everyone's bringing up right now. We need poll workers. If you really believe in democracy and you want to go and defend democracy, the best way of doing that is participating in being a poll worker.
And it's not hard to do.
No. And they'll train you, believe me. And we're working on that right now in North Carolina, is making sure that we have enough poll workers, because that's just going to magnify our ability to go and get people in and out in a quick pace. Because I think that's my fear is what we saw in Georgia, is these huge, massively long lines of people waiting hours to go and vote. We don't want that. We want to make sure that people have that opportunity to go and,
Isn't that nuts? In the most powerful, most innovative country in the history of civilization, in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, we're still doing this. It's really just crazy to me that there isn't a better system, that we haven't devised a way to ensure that everyone gets in and out. We can do this voting thing in a couple of minutes. It's really crazy to me.
Yeah, but you know what? It is crazy, but it's understandable, because it's not in the best interest of one of the parties. We know that there's a lot of low-wage workers that don't have the ability to wait in line for hours. We have people with families. We have the working class that can't afford to go and take a whole day off of work in order to go and wait in line for 6 hours to go to vote. It's absolutely insane. That's why I'm always for the national holiday. I don't want to like stir up a whole bunch of controversy, but switching out Columbus Day to go and have a voting holiday would be great for the American public.
No, I think we should have a whole weekend. Look, if Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate could take a long weekend while families are worried about losing their homes and not being able to put food on the table as they've gone over the unemployment cliff, we could take a long weekend, have off, go vote, have celebrations around the idea of voting, actually make this, make it, kind of a 4th of July type party weekend where, hey, we're going to go vote and celebrate democracy and celebrate self-rule and self-governance. It's going to be great. We can even wear, powdered wigs and whatever the hell else you want.
Exactly. You know what? And it's funny you mention that because I brought that up a couple of times in the last elections, is make it a party. You know what? Everyone go and vote. And when you get done, go and celebrate the fact that you did your commitment as far as being a citizen, because in our government, everyone does have a role within our whole entire system. And as a citizen, your role is to vote. You're the foundation of our democracy when it comes to this. Like, your voice really does matter at the end of the day. And I know that that's really tough to see. And I know it's discouraging with what's happened in the past, but that's all by design too. It's constantly discouraging people from using their vote to go and elicit change that we desperately need.
It's crazy. I also wanted to get your thoughts. I know you guys are getting battered by the hurricane down there. Everything okay? Everyone safe and well?
In my family, we are. Like, it passed through really, really quickly. Unfortunately, the hurricane spun off a few tornadoes, and I think we had a couple people die near the coast. It's just the nature of these things.
Isn't this early?
It really is. And I was actually talking to my wife about that too. We're already up to eyes. And I think if I'm right, there's probably about 3 or 4 months still left in hurricane season.
Now, are we there yet? Did we get to hurricane season yet? I wasn't even sure we were
just
in it yet.
And I'm not a meteorologist, so someone's probably going to go and correct me, but I think we probably just started not too long ago. But they always say that it's we're at a record pace in regards to the storms coming through.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up, Ted, is because, as the climate change happens, as we fail to respond to it, not only is weather going to get much more severe, and we're going to have, chaos and disaster because of that. They're talking more virus. They're talking more, who knows what down the road, and we're not handling this one well. No. So the fact that we've continued to drop the ball on this, there seems to be no leadership whatsoever for this one, let alone another one. I'm obviously concerned about where we are as not just a country, but as a planet.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot to unpack in regards to that. So I think the first issue is we're almost they're talking about how we have to do something in regards to climate change almost immediately. We're losing a year. It's almost gone completely off the radar. And time is so precious right now when it comes to this. And then you bring up a really good point too, because I was thinking about this myself when we were talking. It was talked about quite a bit on the news down here. You have to make a really tough choice. So this was a very fast-moving, weak hurricane. If this was a big one, do you stay at home or do you go to a shelter? And we know what these shelters have looked like in the past couple of years.
Yeah, you're packed in like sardines.
Conditions. Yeah, exactly. And risk going and getting COVID-19. And then on top of that, really take a look at who traditionally goes to these shelters. It's the elderly, it's people with families, it's children. It's that high-risk population where you really don't have a whole lot of choices in regards to what you're doing. And we need to really be prepared. And so one thing that I do is I volunteer with Team Rubicon, which is an organization that does disaster relief, veterans deployed to areas that need immediate assistance. FEMA is not picking up the slack in regards to this. They should be the ones that are leading this. They should be the ones preparing for it. And what's happening is nonprofits and different organizations are doing it, but they're getting stretched so thin right now. It's, how many storms, how many tornadoes, how many earthquakes, how many fires can you fight before you run out of resources and you run out of manpower? And that's, goes back to just preparation in regards to the government right now. Trump does not prepare for anything.
But here's the thing, and I go back to 2015 and 2016 and say, we knew this. This isn't a surprise. So when we're not prepared, and when we find out that Jared Kushner and was advising him, don't worry about the virus, it's just in those Democratic states. When this became more about politics than actual governance, I was nowhere near surprised, because this is who they are.
Yeah, and it goes back to impacting a certain population. You have people that don't have a lot of money living in these low-lying areas. That's why the housing's so cheap there. And it goes and impacts like people that can't recover afterwards. It's really frustrating. It's really, we need a really big change. And I know that that goes back to the whole entire Obama pitch that he had, but now so more than ever, it's almost like we have to almost wipe the slate clean and take a look at what we do as a nation and really make some drastic changes that aren't going to be comfortable. And I think that's the other problem that we have as far as Americans are concerned, is we like to be comfortable. We don't like wearing masks. We don't like
I don't.
sorting or recycling. But you know what? We need to go and start doing that. And we need to become a world leader again in regards to what we're doing, because we're in the back of the pack now.
But even beyond the recycling, and I know a lot of my environmental friends say, "Oh, we need to recycle everything." I say, no, we don't need to recycle. What we need to do is we need to stop it at the manufacturing point. Like, bottled water to me is insane. Why the hell do we put water in plastic bottles? When I was a kid, there were drinking fountains everywhere. That was fine.
Yep. Or the packaging. You
Exactly.
can go and buy a thumb drive from Best Buy, and it has 3 times the size of plastic that's surrounding it. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, it's just theft prevention, but you're killing the environment by doing that. And so it's making changes on a personal level. And I think we've been trying to do that at my house too. We've noticed that we take, the trash comes every single week. The can actually only goes out every 2 weeks, because we've been so careful about what we've been purchasing and how we go and look at our waste in regards to this. And there's huge, bigger picture things too, as far as renewable energy, that we can go and really take advantage of. And I wish we did more of that in North Carolina. Kind of bringing it back to my state, we produce solar energy. I think it's probably the second or third in the country as far as comparing to other states. I know California and I think Arizona might be 1 and 2. But there's a great opportunity for us to go and make changes, and going into what you always discuss, retraining people that might be in industries that are dying to go into a brand new area that is up and coming and can go and actually provide a great job for someone else.
Yeah. No, and yesterday we talked with Pedro DaCosta, economic reporter from Market News, and he had a great point. He said, this is one of those moments where you have an opportunity to reimagine what the future looks like. We're in the middle of this horrible crisis. This is an opportunity to rethink, reimagine, reinvent, and to do the things that maybe we didn't have the political will to do just a year ago, but now we've got a choice and we've got a chance. And my mind is kind of in that vein right now.
Yeah, it's you look at FDR and you look at what was happening right before, and him jumping right into it, and it was not popular at the time. There was a lot of people that were giving him pushback in regards to it, and he almost said, I don't care, we're doing this right now, and that changed the whole entire American landscape in regards to some of the things that we have that we take for granted because they didn't exist, before our lifetime. There's a great opportunity here, and I hope that we can go and come together and actually go and do that, and we don't end up becoming the next failed empire. And that's always my fear, is that empires come and go, and the American empire was around for a little bit, and I don't want us to go and lose what we had. I can feel it slipping through our fingers right now.
Yeah, it's a huge concern to me. Last thing I wanted to ask you about. I know you're a veteran. You're an outdoors guy. Today, Trump had the big presser, the signing ceremony, where he signed the Great American Outdoors Act, which was passed in a bipartisan fashion. But he's kind of positioned himself now that he's the new Teddy Roosevelt, because nobody's ever done anything like this. Passing this kind of legislation to protect our parks. outside of him, Donald Trump, and Teddy Roosevelt now, I guess.
Yeah. It's funny how that happens, right before an election. But yet the past 3 years, he's been doing everything he can to go and destroy the environment. So if you really are an outdoorsman and you really care about the environment, you want clean rivers and streams. What has he been doing? He's been slashing regulations in regards to that. The wildlands that we have that are untouched, selling them off to oil companies, drilling, we were talking about this a couple of years ago when he was basically like federal lands. I think it was Utah, and like a lot of like these historic places. We call them like national monuments, but they're actually nature themselves. He was basically selling off to the highest bidder.
Right.
This is just a joke. Like it's a way to go and try to get some quick votes from the Republicans that are more controversial. I'm trying to think of the word there. Like the more like outdoorsy Republicans. And we have a lot of them here in North Carolina.
Yeah, your hunting fish crowd.
Yeah, and I'll be honest too. Those are the ones that he's lost. And he's trying to win them back because a lot of them, they do care about the environment. They actually probably care about the environment more than some Democrats, in all honesty. And they've seen what's been going on, and especially here in North Carolina. And it's very probably similar to what's happening up in Pennsylvania also. Our land is just getting polluted by industry. And it breaks my heart because North Carolina is a beautiful, beautiful state. And we've seen coal ash dumped in our waters. We have forever chemicals poisoning our waters. It's just a tragedy. And then, it's him taking advantage of the timing of the situation.
Yeah. I mean, here's the guy who deregulated most industries so that they could pollute at will. But this is him, staking his ground on Teddy Roosevelt's legacy. And I guess, look, if you can get away with it. But lastly, before I let you go, should we beat him up for saying Yosemite wrong?
And like, so my personal opinion when it comes to these little things, it takes away from the big picture. And maybe, the Yosemite, actually, I'll give it a pass because this whole thing may have slipped underneath the radar if he didn't go and do that. And at least it's causing a little bit of discussion. But in reality, we need to go and kind of look at the policies. Because what happens is if we kind of get into the name calling, the schoolyard kind of goofing around, it takes away from the bigger picture. And it just pushes someone that we may be able to go and get on our side a little bit further away from us.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you expect from this guy? Like, he can barely say anybody's names, or like, I wouldn't be surprised if he knew where he was half the time.
I wasn't going to beat up on him because I'm terrible with people's names, but at least I can say Yosemite. But the thing is, and this is where my frustration is, he's taking credit for, because look, we have backlogged maintenance on a lot of these national parks. And if you remember, and I know most people don't, but one of the Republican hostage situations during sequester was part of the reason that our parks and everything is in the mess that it's in and the disrepair that it's in and the shutdowns that they had that caused all those problems. That's a big part of this too. But Ted, I appreciate the thoughts, the time. As always, great stuff. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to having you back again real soon.
No, anytime, Rick. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Ted Corker. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at RedTRaccoon. Very popular Twitter commentator. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day Michael Siegel, business agent for New York City's Local 3 IBEW, announced the lights would be going out on Broadway for a half an hour. Electricians had been on strike for nearly a week to protest Consolidated Edison's refusal to employ union electricians for work on its new Waterside plant. The company claimed it could only use members of the Brotherhood of Edison Employees, an independent union. The walkout also affected electricians at area construction sites and at 25 defense contractors across the city. The union had agreed to exempt electricians at the Brooklyn Navy Yards, where the strike held up work on 4 battleships. Also, the IBEW allowed electricians at Ford Instrument to return to work, given they had orders for $100 million in defense instruments. Siegel announced that at 9 p.m. the following evening, maintenance men not on strike would pull the switches on all signs in Times Square in sympathy to bring attention to their plight. After the half-hour blackout, the IBEW continued to fight injunctions brought by the New York Electrical Contractors Association. Harry Van Arnsdale Jr., business manager for Local 3, declared the blackout had been more successful than they had hoped. He characterized the switch-off as a blackout for enlightenment. Naval officials complained, however, that the strike held up vital defense projects. Newspapers noted that Broadwayites suddenly noticed the moon when the estimated 10 million watts of super lighting was turned off. A Times Square veteran noted it was the darkest since 1918 when a Zeppelin raid alarm caused a blackout. The strike was called off a week later when Con Ed acknowledged its previous agreement with the IBEW. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Reuters reported today that you remember those Clorox wipes, the disinfectants that were gonna save us? It's gonna take out coronavirus. We're gonna be able to wipe things down. It was gonna keep our hands clean. It was really a great announcement. I was going, hey, this is good for them. It's an American company. In fact, I know where I grew up in Cleveland, there's a Clorox plant right there. I actually know people who work for Clorox. Good, this is great. Turns out maybe we won't have the wipes that we need until 2021. And you go, but wait a second, we need them now. Isn't this why you have capacity to ramp up manufacturing? Isn't this what the capitalists tell us? That when the demand is there, they ramp up production and so they can feed the demand. This is the capitalist model. And yet it seems we're more reliant than ever on Chinese goods. And the last I checked, what is it? The FDA's put out a list of about 100 hand sanitizers to stay the hell away from because they could be toxic. Not good times. Here to share some thoughts on where we are, why we are, and how we are with regards to our manufacturing and the fact that we're so dependent on China. I've asked Emily de la Brouillard to come talk with us. She is our China expert. She's also the co-founder of Horizon Advisory. HorizonAdvisory.org is their website. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's great to be on.
So, I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at this story about, we're not getting the PPE we need. We're not getting the stuff manufactured fast enough. We're not able to protect ourselves. And I'm going, this goes right back to things we've been talking about. The fact that we've outsourced our production, we've outsourced all of our critical needs, and now we're dependent.
Yeah. And this is what we've been saying for the past few months. For decades, China has been making us dependent on its manufacturing. With COVID and with the story of medical supplies, that became so obvious. But instead of actually taking this as an opportunity to shore up our capabilities and do something about it, we're just getting more and more dependent on China. So now it comes out that we don't only need China for masks or for pharmaceuticals, we also need it for Clorox. And that's still happening. And China is doing everything it can to use this opportunity as a chance to make further inroads into our system.
Yeah, and this is one of those moments where I've talked about Dan Coats, the former senator from Indiana and former Trump National Intelligence Director, his recent op-ed on why we can't have a Cold War with China. And moreover, it was more like we need to play nice until we can figure out how maybe we have a coherent strategy to take them on. And on that hand, I agree with him. But this idea that there's nothing we can do is kind of frightening to me.
Absolutely, and that you're going to let an adversary continue to take advantage of you and continue to siphon your resources until you get your act together. And the thing is, it's not just that we don't do anything about it, it's that we help fuel China's strategy. We just came out with a report over the weekend about how hundreds of millions of dollars of Paycheck Protection Program loans went to Chinese companies. And that's money that was supposed to help US small businesses and that was supposed to provide like necessary capital for relief for our economy. And it went to Chinese state-owned enterprises, Chinese military companies, Chinese propaganda outlets.
It's I'm literally dumbfounded. When I saw that, I mean, it's how the fastest way for you to destroy yourself is this way. I mean, I know people who are trying to get those PPP loans, who are trying to save their small business. I know people who are struggling to make ends meet. I know people who are struggling to get through the unemployment system because the phone lines are never not jammed. And yet we find out that the Chinese, because they've got, unlimited resources and they've got incredible technology, that they've cashed in already. I'm literally dumbfounded.
Yeah. And it's not just that they're PRC companies, it's that these are state-owned enterprises and military companies. And they're also companies, in some cases, that have an explicit tasking to be in the US to obtain American technology. So our PPP loans are going to Chinese state-owned companies that are in the US so that they can steal our technology.
That's kind of like, and to use like a high school analogy, it's kind of like, drawing your own kick me sign, putting the tape on the kick me sign, and then breaking your arm to put it on your own back while simultaneously kicking yourself.
But you also paid the medical bill for that broken arm of yours. Yeah.
No, I would say you just didn't get it fixed. I mean, because this is where we are. I mean, it's, when I see these stories, and I see tons of them all the time of how dependent we are and how desperate we're becoming, especially in this moment. And then you look at, the fact that a lot of the stuff that we were told, get these hand sanitizers because you got to sanitize your hands. My wife is crazy about this. Every time I get out of the car, put hand sanitizers on. And now we're finding out that a lot of it no good for you. Because you've got these foreign companies that are, hey, let's just as quick as throw as much crap into the U.S. market as possible. And, maybe they catch us, maybe they don't. And that's somebody else's problem.
Yeah, and like when you look at this in terms of the generic drug story, the fact that a massive percentage of our generic drugs are being produced in China and their quality is just going down and down and down and down. So we can't trust the medicine we're taking at a time when there are medical issues beyond anything we've ever seen before.
Yep.
And we're okay with that?
Oh, I'm not okay with this at all. But here's the thing, and this is, if you go back to the Coates article, he was talking about, and this has always been the frame, Emily, we can't possibly take on China's manufacturing prowess because we need the cheap products. We need the cheap goods. We can't go to Walmart and fill up our basket with, cheap plastic crap for $50 and be satisfied with that. We absolutely have to have the cheap goods or we'll just collapse.
When really the reason that we're collapsing is because we don't invest in the physical economy and in the actual ability to produce real things.
I got into this back and forth just the other day, actually, because Nike, I don't know if you saw the Nike ad. I think it's like Together or something, but it's really an incredible ad. And I put it out and I gave them credit for that. I said, no, this is a really incredible ad. I mean, it's masterfully done. The editing was incredible. I said, I don't like Nike. I've never purchased a Nike product. I will never purchase a Nike product. But this is an incredible ad. And immediately I got pushback because, well, Nike's a good company because they blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, yeah, but they've never made a shoe in the U.S. And they use basically slave labor around the world to make massive profit off of their shoes. I have a problem with that. And I have a problem with any company that does that, which is why, again, I'm a labor guy who thinks we should be buying American-made products, union-made products, and at the least, sustainable products with good labor practices globally.
Well, and we're saying we need these cheap goods, we need to be able to go to Walmart, and no one's saying, why are these goods so cheap? That's because they're made by forced labor in Xinjiang. And, we have these norms as a country, and I'm pretty sure, those norms are against forced labor and genocide of an ethnic minority at the hands of an authoritarian state. But we're willing to turn a blind eye to that because we want our shoes or our Walmart basket as cheap as they can be.
Well, what do you say to the person who goes, well, if we didn't buy stuff from them, they would be worse off? Because I love this conservative argument that if we weren't exploiting them, somebody else would be, and it would be much worse.
As China, over the past 30 years, the authoritarian regime in China has not opened, has not gotten more democratic, and in fact has gone in the opposite direction. And it's not only gotten more repressive and moved towards a much more dangerous and terrifying form of authoritarianism, but it's also started to export that authoritarianism internationally. So our buying from Beijing is what allows it to do this, and what fuels its ambitions to turn the world into its dictatorship.
Yeah, I mean, we've basically, and this is one of those things where people go, oh, Emily, we've lost all these jobs. I go, we didn't lose them. We know exactly where they are. We allowed American companies to move them overseas for quick profit, and they've used that model against us. So the question that I keep coming back to is, and we've had this conversation, is it too late to pull back on this? How do you compete in a marketplace like ours that is open, that does allow lots of foreign investment? Because it's not just China that's heavily invested in the U.S. There are a lot of foreign companies that are probably getting PPP money as well. How do you pull back from this? And how do you do it in a way that you're not going to start the next Cold War? Because I keep getting this, Rick, trading partners don't go to war. Because, the big argument now is if we stop trading with them, if we stop giving in, we're eventually going to start dropping bombs on each other because, well, everything seems to be pointing that way. For me, the one of the most recent things that points to that is Japan. Japan, there's been a story, I'm sure you've seen it, that they're looking at first strike capabilities that they haven't had since, World War II. And to me, that's sending the message that they really don't think that we're going to be effective in the coming century.
Yeah, and the thing is, China doesn't see it as we're trading partners now, and one day we might go to war. What China sees it as is that we are in a war, and they're just using trade and asymmetric trade and cheating in the trade system as their means of war. And if we realize that we're losing, maybe one day we'll turn to military war, but by that point it will be too late and they'll have won, and that will be our desperate last attempt.
Yeah, they're going to buy all the stuff that we need to make our war machine. And this is where, it's been probably 10 years since my friend Scott Paul over at the Alliance for American Manufacturing came out with this enormous book. And I've still got it somewhere. It's a giant book of all of the things that our military is dependent on for the Chinese. And this, again, goes back a decade. I can't imagine how much worse it is today.
Yeah, because it's everything in terms of manufacturing, in terms of technology, in terms of critical inputs like rare earths. But then you also get to the other side of the equation, and it's the information systems too. And does our command and our control work? I think that there's a lot there that hasn't been explored about the degree to which it's penetrated by China. And that's really scary, because that's also our enduring advantage, is that we are the military superpower. And that's something that strategically we should be able to use to make China go on the defensive. If we signal to them that we're serious about competition, that might divert their resources in a direction that keeps them from using them to just take advantage of us economically. So
let me ask you this then, because, Coates has said we definitely don't want the Cold War with China. Are you saying maybe that's the only way we're going to be able to stop this, is to make China think that maybe there is a military option here and that they go the Russian route? Because Coates' argument was we can't win this Cold War like the last one because it's completely different, because the Russians weren't invested in our country. They didn't have all of our supply chains perverted. Is that where your thought process is?
So here's what's absolutely true. This is not the Cold War environment, and we're in a totally different world. So we will have to go about this competition differently. That said, there are certain assumptions and strategic models that worked for us in the Cold War. And if we can strip away the parts of them that are tactical manifestations designed for a different era, then those are still really useful. So looking at your adversary and saying, here are my adversary's strengths and weaknesses. Let me exploit the weaknesses and shore up mine. And not deal with the things that are their overpowering strengths. That's still just how you go about competing. That's normal. One of China's weaknesses is that they're scared of our military. So the easiest, like the low hanging fruit here is that we tell them that we're serious about competing. And I don't say like, this does not mean we're starting a war. What this means is that we force them to invest their resources into things that are like defensive capabilities that don't hurt us.
Right.
So if they think that we have a missile launcher that's really scary for them, they have to put money into designing missile defenses. And that's great. And that means that they're not putting that money into absolutely subverting our economic system.
It's interesting. I mean, but what do you say to the person who then goes, well, if we're creating all these toys that blow things up and you know, diverting things from, you know, from butter and shoes and sugar for, you know, for families, what's to say that, you know, eventually people don't feel the need that, hey, we've got these toys, we got to blow them off, and we need to have, you know, fireworks someday.
We've got a whole lot of toys anyway. That's what we're doing. That's what we do. We have so much money going into building all these toys that blow things up. The problem is we're building toys that blow things up that don't scare China. So why don't we realize that they're the competition right now?
Right.
So that if we're going to put these resources into big toys, they should be the kind of toys that scare China.
No, that's a good point. But you know, everyone keeps telling me that the cyber war is where China is fighting this battle, and that maybe we should be fighting on that plane. Because as I understand, and obviously you're the person who would know better than me, that we're way behind. And as we develop these new technologies and as we develop these new toys, they're just stealing them. They're just hacking into our computers, and they're stealing them. And if it's not, look, TikTok is a very small part of this, but they're stealing from us.
Yeah, and this is the next really interesting question. So we say cyber war is the most important thing. It's where we have to compete, and so then we put our money into really fancy, cutting edge research and development into artificial intelligence, or we put our money into taking AI and sticking it onto something that already exists. China says, oh, cyber war is important. We're going to put our resources into collecting as much information as we can from things like TikTok, as well as from military tools, and also by finding platforms that are robust and defensible that are going to aggregate that information and have good communication mechanisms among them. So we end up with like a lot of shiny things that either don't work that well or China can steal, and China ends up with a massive information advantage and an ability to scale that. And their whole approach is premised on this strategy of military-civil fusion, where commercial companies, so the Huawei's of the world, the satellite systems of the world, the TikToks of the world that are collecting information in the commercial domain are also connecting to the military world. So China's cyber war capabilities benefit from all of the commercial interactions that Chinese champions have in the rest of the world that also gather and shape information. So it's these completely different conceptions of cyber war, and ours loses.
Yeah, no, I'm listening to you every time I talk to you make me more afraid of how far we are behind and how they've got their act together. Because we like to be, oh, that's just China. They're backwards. The Joe Biden frame of we don't have to worry about them because they're disjointed and all this stuff. They don't appear to be very disjointed the way you're laying it out. They have a very clear, concise path, a coherent direction forward, and it's all bad for us. And we don't. And this is where I go back to the Coates piece, where Coates talks about having a coherent policy, one that draws in the rest of the world, and basically ripped on his former boss without actually naming his name for not doing any of those things. I mean, we're more isolated than we've ever been, and we're more vulnerable, I think, than we've been. And I don't like to admit that.
No, and we have like such faith. That's why we care about this country, is that we have faith in this country and in our leadership. And so to look around and say we're vulnerable or we don't have our acts together. And the only positive is that you look around and you say that when you get to that low point and when you're at rock bottom, as they say, then you look around as a country and you pull your act together. And you use that as a chance to say, oh, we're wrong on all of these different axes. We need a new approach.
Yeah. So this is this moment where, and this is one of these topics that, I've been talking to conservatives about and Trump supporters, because this is one of those things that I agreed with Trump in 2015 and 2016 about. I kept saying the blind squirrel found a nut. I think he's going to screw it up, and he has. But he was in tune with the reality that China's kicking our behind. and that the average everyday working person in this country is tired of their opportunities being taken away. So do you see that, in a Biden administration, that maybe this is the issue that pulls the country together? And because I've been saying the only way I think we get away from being so polarized is if you have that kind of a war mentality. Maybe I don't want dropping bombs on people, but this idea that, we're somehow going to save the country, and not do it in a racist, the China virus. No, we're doing it against a foreign adversary who is literally eating our lunch.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the issue that can do that and can bring about unity. And the other thing is, this is a foundational issue. It has to be the one that comes first, because we don't solve inequality in our country until we solve China. We don't solve climate change until we solve China. We don't solve our industrial base until we solve China. So this is not only the thing that rallies bipartisan support and brings people together and has something that they care about and are willing to work toward, but it's actually like the building block and literally what we have to do if we're going to get out of this mess.
I'm right there with you. And the hope is that, the hope is, and this has been my great fear, that because Trump was, China, that anyone anti-Trump is going to, no, China's good. And that we end up polarizing this issue again. And China, playing on that, just continues to do what they've been doing, and we get much worse off. So I'm glad to hear that you think maybe it's possible. I hope folks will check your recent study out over at horizonadvisory.org. We'll get links out to make sure how you can take a look at that. As the title, U.S. Small Business Bailout Money Flowed to Chinese-Owned Companies, written by the good folks over at Horizon Advisory. Emily, I appreciate the time. It's always great having you on. I appreciate your knowledge, and I tell you, it scares the hell out of me.
Rick, it's always fun chatting. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Good stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. What do you think? Do you think China's the problem of the next year, 5, 10? And do we have that long? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
We had, for the first time since 1960, watches and warnings from Florida to Canada.
Hurricane Isaias hits North Carolina amid a pandemic and makes weather history. Rising sea levels pushing storm impacts further inland, study warns. Plus, 15 states clear the air by moving to all-electric trucks and buses.
All of those moves and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So this is really the worst possible time for a hurricane to happen, at the time of an epidemic that is out of control in a state.
Oh, use your imagination, Dr. Amesh Adalja. The worst time for the hurricane will be on Election Day. Bank on it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, so at the end of our last Green News Report, we were left arguing about whether people should plant those mystery seeds that are coming from China, even though the USDA says don't plant them. Well, as it turns out, we now know what those mystery seeds are. The USDA has identified them as being seeds for mustard, cabbage, morning glories, roses, hibiscus, and herbs such as mint, sage, rosemary, and lavender. See? Nothing to worry about.
Well, I would disagree with that. Sometimes things can still be invasive species, and Washington State agriculture scientists said that they also found amaranth, which could harm the nation's soybean crop.
Well, I'm going with the USDA here. What does Washington State know about these things? What do you got for us today, Desi Doyen? We'll argue about it later.
Okay. Hurricane Isaias hit southern North Carolina as a fast Category 1 on Monday night, bringing torrential rains and winds and knocking out power to thousands. As we go to air, the National Hurricane Center forecasts Isaias will travel up the U.S. East Coast. Fueled by unusually warm ocean waters, Isaias is the earliest, 9th named Atlantic storm on record, not normally seen until mid-September. And it's the first time since record keeping began in 1851 that we've seen 2 Atlantic hurricanes, Hannah and Isaias, form in the last week of July. Officials along the eastern seaboard are now scrambling to arrange evacuation shelters and stage emergency response assets, all during a global pandemic that has already strained state healthcare systems. Those compound impacts worry infectious disease expert Dr. Amesh Adalja of Johns Hopkins University here on MSNBC.
And remember, some of the same resources that we're going to use to take care of coronavirus patients are going to be needed to take care of people that are injured from the hurricane, that are displaced from the hurricane. And you're going to see disruption of healthcare, just like we saw, for example, with Superstorm Sandy several years ago in the New York area. So this is really the worst possible time for a hurricane to happen, at the time of an epidemic that is out of control in a state.
I know they're trying to maintain social distancing in these shelters, but if they get overly crowded, it will be next to impossible. Down in Florida, they were actually sending people out to hotels rather than keeping them in a group shelter.
A very expensive proposition.
Yep.
Extreme weather hits even worse in developing countries. In Bangladesh, one of the world's poorest nations, right now, severe flooding from the most intense seasonal monsoon rains in decades has displaced millions of people. About a third of Bangladesh is affected. Officials say the floods are noteworthy this year, both for their extreme intensity and long duration. Again, all during a pandemic. This is the reason why the Pentagon calls man-made climate change a threat multiplier, because it intensifies other disasters.
Other existing problems get much worse with global warming.
Yep. And a flurry of new studies adds rising sea levels to that list. The first, from the journal Scientific Reports, finds that rising seas are already driving the impacts of powerful coastal storms much, much further inland, and projects that extreme storm surge and high tides will reach much farther inland in coming years, putting tens of millions more people and $14 trillion worth of assets and infrastructure at increased risk of periodic flooding worldwide. The researchers found that low-lying Bangladesh is particularly at risk, along with parts of France, Germany, India, and China. And here in the United States, Virginia and North Carolina are at highest risk.
Well, that's nice to tell them after they've been hit with a hurricane.
Finally, 15 states have announced that they will follow California's push to electrify all trucks and buses, announcing that they've agreed to develop a joint action plan aiming for 30% of all medium and heavy-duty vehicle truck sales to be zero emissions by 2030 and 100% zero emissions by 2050.
Communists.
Air quality experts call it one of the most significant efforts to reduce harmful diesel engine emissions in the United States. And bonus, states that take action now will save money on healthcare costs and lives, thanks to improving air quality.
Well, Donald Trump is not going to be happy about any of that. Maybe he'll write a book about it from jail. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, it's infuriating to me when you look at that report that Emily's group, Horizon Advisory, has put out, that millions of dollars have gone to Chinese companies that people on Main Street didn't get. And you go, well, that's it was for everybody. This is it's who we are. And look, that would be great if everyone did get something. If we did have the ability to save, in part those 2.5 million small businesses that have closed and may never reopen. We're looking into the possibility in the coming months of millions of people losing their homes. I mean, it's scary, the numbers, when you sit and you look at the numbers. And we talked about it yesterday with Pedro da Costa, who is, in my view, one of the really good economic reporters. 54 million people filing first-time unemployment claims, 30 million people saying that they couldn't pay their rent on August 1st. That's frightening. Those numbers are frightening, and it's not just a matter of those folks being kicked out to the curb. It's a matter of the chaos, the domino effect that goes along with this, and the fact that it's going to be the moneyed interests again who do really well. The Donald Trumps of the world who would be thrilled with another collapse so that they could go in and buy low and sell high. The American dream. If you're a Trump, but the sad reality of the rest of us aren't. And when you have these scenarios where working people are going to be losing their homes and things that they've worked their entire lives over, it's angering and it's frustrating. Some interesting news coming out of Washington. Tim Kaine, the former vice presidential candidate and current senator from Virginia, had an interesting statement. He said that he knew. He said we knew that the Republicans were lying in 2016 when they said that they can't, have a confirmation hearing of a Supreme Court justice during an election year. He said we kind of knew that was a lie, and you go, really? You're just now figuring that out? He said, we knew that, they didn't want to put, Barack Obama's person on the court. There's now talk, potentially, with 91 days left until the election, that there could be a Supreme Court seat open. There's some whispering. And this is, at this point, just whispering. I know there's a lot of hope on the right that Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes. And I know there's a lot on the left of people who are saying an awful lot of prayers to make sure that she doesn't. But there's also the potential that, someone like Clarence Thomas goes, you know what? I think I'm going to get in the RV with the wife and just drive around for a while. We can go to Tea Party events and get free stuff from people. There's a possibility of that, and a possibility that the Republicans ram through, one last theft of a Supreme Court seat. And, Kane's saying don't do it because, this will set up a situation for potentially down the road where you could have some court packing talk. And, I read this and I'm going, is it possible that Democrats would find the spine to do something like that? So he's saying, look, we don't want to do it. We don't want to do it. But if Clarence Thomas retires, or if something happens to RBG or whatever, somebody retires or steps down or whatever, don't even think about ramming through a nomination in such a short period of time. Now remember, Merrick Garland was nominated, back in 2016, well early. There was plenty of time for that to happen. Because if I remember right, Scalia died, at the beginning of 2016. They put forth Garland's name at, I think it was Orrin Hatch who said, they won't put someone like Merrick Garland up. And they put Merrick Garland up. And then Hatch, didn't move forward in pushing for his confirmation. Because Garland was the centrist candidate. He was no radical lefty. Just that McConnell didn't even want centrist. He wanted radical righty. He wanted corporatist. He wanted, what we got, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. So this is interesting. And I'm hoping this will send the warning to, Thomas and the rest of them that, hey, if you do step down in this moment, we're not going to fill the seat with someone who's, crazy like you. And hopefully RBG stays well. That's kind of my hope. But again, another one of these very interesting moments that we have as a country. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Do you think the Democrats actually have the spine to push forth? Do you think they actually have the spine to open up the courts? Even though, the last time this was even brought up, the country went spastic. But it did right the court. So it actually got us the Fair Labor Standards Act long term. So it's one of those moments, interesting times in our history. But again, another amazing day of insanity thanks to our leader. We're ticking down the days till November, and at the end of it, you want this craziness to stop. You want the insanity to go away. You want to go back to some bit of normalcy. Election days, 91 days from now? Mark it on the calendar and make sure you get out and vote. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show.